Welcome back, everybody. Rudy with Alpha Investments with a very special video I'm proud to share with everybody. Today, I'm going to release some information. I've been having private discussions with Jeff Finnigan. He is the corporate force of will, global guy in charge of community relations, growth of Force of Will, the card game, and to discuss and kind of monitor what's going on with the game around the world. Now, this is a private conversation I've had with him, and I have a very specific, really raw set of questions and answers, Q&A. I have asked him, received permission to share with the world. These questions I'm going to share with you guys. If you're a Force of Will fan or curious what's going to happen moving forward with the card game as a whole and the company, you don't get much more accurate and much more authentic than going to the corporate printing company card game themselves. So the questions I asked are very long, they're very in-depth, and these are sensitive questions. I did not hold back. These are raw questions. So in this video, I asked Jeff in the Force of Will Corporate for him to give me the information. I'm talking everything about how do you feel about the failures of the past? What's going on with the new print runs? What's the relationship with Force of Will and distributors? I mean, we're talking very, very specific questions, and I did not hold back at all. I mean, how do you guys feel about the secondary market? What are we going to do to address it to help box sales moving forward? What kind of discussions internally with Force of Will Corporate took place about the game, the failures, and what's moving forward? Are we going to change? Are we actually going to evolve? Or are we going to run this to the ground? So yeah, obviously, before we get into this, be aware, we're on the back of the new set coming out in a few weeks. We will be doing box openings. I will be selling the box to the patrons for $69. So of course, I'm this shameless Rudy plug, because I know all the Force of Will community is probably going to watch this video. This video is probably going to get at least 1,000 views. And of course, this is going to be pretty much letting the public know I'm discussing an open line of communication with Jeff Finnigan and Force of Will. And our long-term plans I'm not really going to discuss with myself publicly and what I want to do with Force of Will and Jeff, but we're going to leave it there. And we want to jump right into the questions and discuss what happened with Force of Will, where it's going, and quite frankly, let's see how they feel about it at corporate. Unlike Magic the Gathering and their card games, these are actually good people you can discuss things with and have a good open communication without emotion and strictly business. What a concept. So without further ado, these are long. This may be a 1 or 2 part video depending how long. I'm not going to go past 30, 40 minutes. So for those of you who are patient, let's do this. So the first question I asked Jeff over there at Force of Will Corporate. Jeff, how does the R&D, research and development team feel about the failures of Force of Will in the past? Do you guys regret making sets like Millennia of Ages? Is it a regret? Or does the R&D department feel that sets like Millennia of Ages was actually just misunderstood? What is you guys' opinion about what happened? Do you feel it was deserved to be a failure? Tell me what you guys think. So Jeff wants everybody to know, look, Millennia of Ages was a complicated issue. The old design team was very focused on the Japanese market. Even after the Grimm cluster took off abroad, MOA was an experimental set for them, but they didn't communicate clearly with the intentions of Millennia of Ages. So communication was the #1 problem. The choices reminded me of a small additional sets that many Japanese card game companies like to do within Japan. Some of the cards actually have had some actually been doing better now that Wanderer, the Twilight Wanderer, is an eternal format, but are still from a commercial standpoint, a 50-card set that added nothing of interest or value was a terrible idea, especially when the standard at the time had rulers in the boxes as well. It had no rulers in the set, if you guys... Jeff told the CEO and the design teams that I will not allow MOA-type sets to ever happen again, let alone make it past the design floor or approval. Okay, let's stop right there. So again, I want to reflect. Force of Will has put people like Jeff in place, and he is specifically telling me, and now the public, that mistakes that they did in the past, there is no way it's going to happen, because there are now systems in place and checks and balances to prevent the early learning curve mistakes of a growing card game. This is a huge thing. Letting people know that they have confidence that they're not going to screw it up and run it to the ground is a huge step forward for credibility for stores to carry the product. Moving on. Vingolf 2, everybody, was a communication issue again. The product was designed to be friendly to new players without having cards that would be eaten up by competitive players. Okay. Now, how do you expect the product to sell? I mean, if you have no cards for people... So, however, Jeff would still argue that the failing was on the company to not address more clearly and in a more realistic method of what the intent was. In addition, the logic was slightly flawed by misunderstanding the foreign Western, United States, North America, TCG community and culture of what they were interested in actually purchasing. Japanese players are incredibly casual players and like to design decks for local stores, similar to the 90s tabletop Magic kitchen table type games. So let's stop there, everybody. Well, actually, let's go a little bit further. Vingolf 2, for example, was so bad. This product turned out it was so bad that some European Union countries decided to not even translate or make the purchases for that set in their country. This is crazy, you guys. Again, Jeff told the company this is not acceptable business practice and generally have pushed them into accepting more international standards for card power level and kind of power creep. So, okay. Interesting. Okay, so this shows, again, when Jeff was hired to step into Force of Will, I'm already getting the vibe right here on the first main question that the purpose of Jeff Finnigan being placed into here was to connect the problems, to connect the dots. The Western culture, like all of us in North America on the Western side of the hemisphere, pretty much compared to what was going on in the Asian culture, the disconnect of how people view the card game, the products, and the culture, and what they think the buyers want are very different. So Force of Will, in the early days, did not expect things to grow and be extreme. Hence the failure of MOA, hence the failure of Vingolf Part 2. So, it's interesting now, especially having somebody at the corporate level, is acknowledging it was a major screw-up, and they have, and by the way, has anybody noticed it? It hasn't happened again. So, clearly, Jeff, you're doing something right. Okay, well, let's keep going. So, into a little bit more detail on Vingolf 2, the root of a lot of what happened in the early days was a design and development team that was not expecting huge international success after the Grimm cluster. Remember, the Grimm cluster was the early days, you guys. The Alice cluster and all that stuff, you guys remember? In combination, they struggled at the time to have an internationally minded development team or even one single consultant to help guide them. So they tried to apply the Japanese logic and culture on a large scale, which did not work, obviously, for the Western culture. So, ridiculous levels of power creep, regalia, anybody? Insanely OP, overpowered rulers, etc. Practices that are fairly standard in Japan, but are very looked down upon in Western countries. People like to think that everyone is the same minded when it comes to card games around the world. But the reality is, there are many different philosophies on how to run a country, and many different philosophies of how to run a company in different countries. The Japanese love the idea of huge, exciting plays, unbalanced cards, competitive, ridiculous OP play, which is actually fairly low on the ladder of things that matter. Locals and casual TCGs are more common in the United States, with many people playing 4 to 5 different card games. One of the biggest complaints Jeff heard over the years is that Force of Will made the same mistake that Magic the Gathering made 25 years ago. Now, this is a completely legitimate complaint from the consumer side. However, for a development team that has no English-speaking international experience outside the CEO and some board members, they have trouble seeing the big picture and incorporating these ideas to good decision-making. Now we have much more deliberate choices regarding power level, set design, and game balance. The change and shift of focus on international USA and EU, European Union, player bases is what has set Force of Will in the right direction and is why the game is growing again. We're going to stop there. That was just the first question out of 10. Whew! Don't you wish every company, can you imagine if Wizards, we could communicate and have real conversations without emotion? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but this is like my favorite video to make probably in a year. Like, I know we have a lot of fun on this channel, but this is incredible to have information and open lines of dialogue about our favorite hobbies. I mean, this is incredible to me. I hope you guys feel the same way. So, wow. So let's reflect on that first question. So the mistakes they made, they knew it. And they were not intentional because they didn't understand the way the Western US EU culture was compared to Japan. So from what I'm gathering in Japan, and those of you in the comment section can confirm or deny this, apparently in Japan, it's a very big deal to have crazy OP cards, crazy combos. It's exciting to just kind of bust the game and make it unbalanced. In US and EU, it's very interesting because we don't like that. People complain when standard and magic is broken. They complain when the game feels broken. So balance in creativity is more important, which is a very interesting concept because the products that were released, some of these in the past, didn't contain the balance. This is real. Okay, it gets better. This is just next question. Jeff, Creepy Rudy wants to know print runs. Let's talk print runs, everybody. On a percentage basis, how much tighter are the print runs of new Force of Will sets? How is Force of Will determining how much to print on every set to not ruin the card game? Come on, this is great. Oh my God. I cannot believe he was actually willing to answer these. This is the first time ever a company has been openly public. This is incredible. As of right now, Jeff says, we generally take each country's pre-orders for Force of Will set, and then our sales team has a percentage-based multiplier they use on the pre-orders for each language, and that is the print run for a Force of Will set. We have only had one set do a second print run in the last 2 years, Time Spinning Witch. I remember that set, actually. And it was reprinted because they messed up on some of the ruler cards. I remember that also. There were some complaints about that. Jeff insisted that they fix the product once we had enough orders, as he felt it was irresponsible as a company to not provide the correct product if possible. Well, that's fair enough, I guess. Not to mention, for a time, this set was incredibly powerful, and so many people wanted the cards in the set. This is going to bring us to secondary market pretty soon here, everybody. We will only... Okay. Now, not to mention, this was during a time that the set was incredibly... Oh, I already read that. The set was incredibly powerful and people wanted the cards. Force of Will was only printing past our pre-orders if it reaches MOQ. I'm assuming that's some sort of makes it worth it or something. To make the print run financially reasonable to do. Okay, yeah, I'm assuming that's some acronym for it has to be financially worth it. In other words, it has to be enough money and sales on the second print run to justify the setup costs and the redo cost of it. The trick, to some degree, according to Jeff, is often the chain of communication was so slow. I apologize. The chain of communication was to show demand from players enough that shops and retailers are willing to comment. From that point, enough shops have to make a request to a distributor. And if multiple distributors requested the reprint, Force of Will would make the reprint for the set. We are pretty quick to make these type of reprints compared to the big guys like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon. Interesting. Okay. Let's stop right there. So question 2. Force of Will is... I don't know if you guys agree. From what I'm gathering from Jeff and Force of Will Corporate here, the print runs are extraordinarily tight. Pretty much they're taking... Which makes sense, because if you guys and all the patrons, everybody watching, if you noticed, a Force of Will set of cards will come out. If they sell out, like I couldn't get more for the patrons. eBay, if you look at all the recent sets on eBay, in the last 2-3 sets, the prices of the boxes no longer collapse like the old box prices. Which brings me to an interesting thing. Next question, everybody, is going to be about secondary market and value of the cards and making things cheap versus expensive. Before we get to that, think about this. If print runs moving forward are going to be this tight and this regulated, this is going to change the dynamic for any store out there who watches this video, because we're dealing with a product that is no longer going to be printed to the ground. In addition to that, with eternal formats and other things they're working on, which will be discussed in future videos, this is going to create a very interesting opportunity, because nobody, and I mean nobody, sits on and invests in sealed Force of Will product, especially the most recent sets in the last 2 years. Nobody does it because every store, if they have one extra box, they want to get rid of it because they're afraid of stuff like this, where the price collapses and people like me come in and buy everything out for pennies on the dollar. So what's going to happen if all these sets they've been making the last 2 years are selling out, there's no restock, And this card game is not actually failing anymore, and it's going to be sustainable. This is going to be a very interesting thing over the next 5 years. Next question, everybody. Does Force of Will have the same attitude? This is what I asked Jeff. Rudy wants to know. Does Force of Will Corporate have the same attitude on the secondary market? Does Force of Will want all the cards to be cheap? Is the video still working? Excellent. Does Force of Will want all the cards inside the boxes to be cheap or almost free? Okay, you guys ready? Jeff says, as a whole, yes. Force of Will is not meant to be expensive, period. However, we have adopted a reasonable policy. We want cards to be accessible within 3 to 4 booster boxes. We would like players to have play sets of all the cards. However, the full arts, secret rares, and their version of lotto cards, you don't have to say lotto cards, Jeff, but thank you for using the term lottery card. Seriously. Love you guys, man. I have often thought Force of Will as a company, and many TCGs can find a good balance with regular, non-foil, non-premium booster packs without being incredibly restrictive and difficult to attain, as playing a huge part of Force of Will. However, I am totally okay with the pimped out type versions of cards being harder to attain for value. The lottery cards, uber rares. In the early days of Force of Will, there was actually promo cards that were never released in any other form other than promo. I think this was a very dangerous concept. If a game is to love long-term competitive viability, there are many cards from the first year of the game in Japan that are unique promos with effects that have never been printed again. I actually didn't know that. Most suck, but there is a few of them that are actually very good. I don't think we'll be doing any more of these type of situations, unless there's special promos for people within the company, a special event type promo that would have questionable legality. Interesting. We aren't against printing joke cards that aren't legal. Meme culture, oh God, hang on everybody. Meme culture isn't lost on Force of Will over here outside the United States. Wait. I think Force of Will, Jeff, Corporate, just said they are cool with printing cool joke meme cards. That has got to be the best line I've ever said on this channel. That is amazing. How amazing would it be to have a meme or a joke promo card? I think that's awesome. I mean, Magic does like unsets and promos and holiday cards. I mean, that's great. Anyone who plays Magic the Gathering, including, I guess Jeff plays Magic, knows that there are style points on having a badass looking deck and a pimped out version. Jeff thinks it's possible to lock players out completely with larger sets, which is great for single sellers, but given our current market player base, I don't think that is where our loyalty lies. We're kept alive by loyal fans and retailers during some of the poor decisions that our company made. As a professor who has studied a bit of gamification and psychology, there's a bit in an ethics line that we game creators have to balance, as addiction and compulsiveness are absolutely apparent in our industry. I agree with that. The greed and the swing, I agree with that. It's a very sensitive thing to balance, everybody. Jeff has no problem with having a $50 to $200 card in Force of Will as long as a more accessible version is available. When normal in-print New Frontier standard cards are over $20 per card, Jeff raises his eyebrow and it bothers him. In the future, if that became normal, I will readjust. But for now, that would be a shock. For the Wanderer, older sets, I'm fine with expensive, rare, alternate cards. For example, you won't see any of us accidentally, here it comes, accidentally reprinting the infamous accident Booty Cat. Cheshire Cat. Anybody remember the Booty Cat? Infamous. I still have like 10 of them. For sure, we may use an old art with pants like we did with the My Will card game, or the My Game campaign, but not secret versions. Whoa, what is this? Hang on. I wouldn't say we would ever do a reserve list like Magic the Gathering, because we are absolutely a game for playing, but there's a good chance that most secret cards will never be reprinted again. So again, pimp cards can be money, no problem. But if someone is willing to put the money up, I wouldn't want someone to be priced out of playing a deck in the community. So, from what I'm gathering, that's interesting. So, Jeff at Force of Will Corporate is saying that they don't like the idea of reserve lists, but they're not against it, as long as it doesn't affect the regular playing cards for the community. So, that's interesting. So, Force of Will, and this is just my opinion, it sounds like to me Force of Will would be open to a reserve list style reprint policy for specialty promo cards or pimped out, full art Uber versions versus regular. I actually think that's a very, very good idea because it'll actually create an attraction for collectors and investors, but it will not affect the players and the price of the cards, but it will build credibility for people who want to buy into expensive stuff. I actually think that's a very fascinating, so like a reserve list, like lottery card version thing. Because right now, Magic the Gathering keeps reprinting all these versions of full arts and lotteries. It's losing its luster. That's interesting, Jeff. That's interesting. Okay, we're going to do one more question here before we cut the video off. This is the halfway point. This is a long video. I apologize, everybody. Yeah, we'll do one more question, everybody. Creepy Rudy wants to know, Jeff, the introduction of Uber Rares, kind of like lottery cards. Rudy felt it was a great way to keep the basic cards cheap, but yet have expensive collectors and investor cards. Do you guys have plans to do more type of unique special inserts and lottery cards? Force of Will Jeff says, absolutely, definitely yes. Apparently, Uber Rares have been a bit of discussion behind the scenes at Force of Will, whether it be the chemical composition of the card, or what have you, or the ability for our new printer to make them was in question. However, recently we've been adding alternate arts to the super rare cards. I like to think of those slots as our chance to play the printing industry, to see what kind of cool stuff we can do. Jeff recently visited a printing company and got to see what kind of R&D they're doing with new printing styles and technologies for the future. It's really cool. I can't promise we'll always do specifically Uber Rares, or we specifically won't do them, but hopefully we'll have some kind of secret, rare, neat cards. Side note, before we end the video, Jeff thinks the variant rarity in the Rhea cluster was a bit boring in comparison to some of the other cards. However, I think it could have been better done. I think there's a ton of room to explore secret rares besides Magic the Gathering's Lotto version of collectible cards. We're going to cut it off there, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Part 2 of this video is going to contain pretty much questions about distributors, what's the relationship and problems, what kind of complaints about the sealed, why aren't the boxes hard clamshell box, why are they cheap and flimsy? We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about selling more boxes and the plans to make Force of Will grow. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you very much to Force of Will Corporate for allowing me to help work with you guys and to help make this game move forward. I'm all in with you guys. We're going to do this. Let's have some fun, guys. Thank you to everybody.